The story of human evolution is not a tale of sudden leaps or miraculous transformations, but rather one of gradual change, subtle adaptations, and slow progress over millions of years. To understand Homo sapiens, our species, we must first accept that we are the product of countless evolutionary steps, each shaped by the environment, chance, necessity, and survival. Unlike myths or legends that speak of humanity's creation in an instant, evolutionary science reveals a far more complex and prolonged journey. A journey measured not in centuries or millennia, but in deep geological time. This introduction sets the stage for a detailed exploration of that slow march, tracing the origins of modern humans from the earliest primate ancestors to the sophisticated species that now dominates the planet. At the heart of this story is the concept of evolution by natural selection, first articulated by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace in the mid-19th century. Evolution explains how life forms change over time, driven by variation within populations, the inheritance of traits, and the differential survival of organisms based on their ability to adapt. Humans are not separate from this process. We are its most intriguing outcome. When we examine the fossil record, genetic evidence, and cultural artifacts, a clear picture emerges. Our development was not linear, but branching, filled with experiments in form and function. Many hominin species once walked the earth, but only Homo sapiens survived to tell the tale. This reality forces us to appreciate that we are both fragile and resilient, one lineage among many, and the sole survivors of a once crowded evolutionary tree. Understanding the slow evolution of humans requires us to examine three interwoven strands: biology, environment, and culture. Biologically, our bodies and brains changed gradually, shaped by the demands of survival in diverse habitats. Environmental factors, such as shifting climates, expanding deserts, and glaciations, forced our ancestors to adapt, migrate, or perish. Culturally, humans developed technologies, social structures, and symbolic systems that gave them advantages far beyond what physical evolution alone could achieve. The interplay between these strands reveals why human evolution is unique. It is not merely the story of bones and genes, but also the story of minds, ideas, and shared knowledge. To appreciate the slowness of our evolution, it is useful to think in terms of timescales. The Earth itself is approximately 4.5 billion years old, while the first primates appeared around 60 million years ago. The earliest hominins, our direct ancestors, emerged roughly 6-7 million years ago. Modern Homo sapiens, however, have existed for only about 300,000 years, a blink in geological time. This long prelude demonstrates how incremental the changes were that eventually produced us. Each adaptation, walking upright, using tools, controlling fire, developing language, took hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of years to solidify. The phrase, "a slow evolution," is not an exaggeration, but a factual description of how painstakingly gradual the process has been. The concept of human uniqueness often tempts us into thinking that our species is a sudden, special creation. But when placed in the broader tapestry of life, we are less an exception and more a continuation of a long shared process. We share about 98–99% of our DNA with chimpanzees and bonobos, indicating that our divergence from a common ancestor with them occurred relatively recently in evolutionary terms, perhaps around 6 million years ago. This genetic closeness underscores that the differences between us and other primates, though profound in their outcomes, were achieved through small, incremental genetic changes compounded over time. For example, the elongation of legs relative to arms, subtle changes in the pelvis, and modifications in brain structure did not happen overnight, but were the cumulative result of slow evolutionary pressures. Another essential point in this introduction is the non-linear nature of human evolution. Unlike a straight line progressing from primitive ape to modern human, the process more closely resembles a branching tree with numerous experiments in hominin form. Species such as Australopithecus afarensis, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and the enigmatic Denisovans all represent different stages of experimentation, each adapting to specific ecological niches. Some survived for millions of years before going extinct. Others overlapped with us and even interbred with our ancestors. The fact that Homo sapiens are the last remaining branch is a reminder that evolution is not directed toward a predetermined goal, but is contingent on survival, adaptability, and sometimes sheer luck. The slow evolution of humans also highlights the crucial role of culture and technology in shaping our destiny. Unlike other animals that rely almost exclusively on biological adaptations, humans began to modify their environment through innovation. The mastery of fire, the invention of tools, the development of language, and the creation of symbolic art all represent cultural evolutionary shortcuts that gave our species immense survival advantages. Yet even these cultural advances were gradual. The first stone tools appeared about 2.6 million years ago, but sophisticated blades and symbolic objects emerged only within the last 100,000 years. The development of agriculture, which radically transformed human society, did not occur until about 10,000 years ago, again underscoring how long the preparatory stages of our journey were. When we speak of the slow evolution of humans, we must also recognize that evolutionary change did not end once Homo sapiens appeared. Our species has continued to evolve biologically and culturally up to the present. For example, the spread of lactose tolerance in certain populations, the resistance to diseases like malaria, and the adaptation to high altitudes in Tibetans and Andean peoples all occurred within the last few thousand years. These are examples of ongoing microevolution, small incremental adjustments to local environments. Meanwhile, cultural evolution has accelerated dramatically, particularly with the rise of technology and globalization. This creates an intriguing paradox. Our biological evolution is slow, but our cultural evolution is rapid, creating a dynamic tension between body and society. Another theme that will unfold throughout this essay is the role of cooperation and social bonding in human evolution. Unlike solitary predators, humans thrived by working together, sharing food, protecting one another, and eventually forming complex communities. The slow development of these social instincts was as crucial as the enlargement of our brains. Our survival depended not just on physical strength or individual intelligence, but on the ability to function as a collective. This insight helps explain why morality, empathy, and cultural traditions became such powerful forces in human history. They were not accidents but adaptive strategies honed over millennia. In tracing this long story, it is important to remain humble. The fossil record is incomplete, and new discoveries continue to challenge our assumptions. A single fossil jawbone, a DNA fragment, or a cave painting can rewrite entire chapters of human prehistory. For instance, the discovery of the Denisovans from a fingerbone fragment in Siberia revolutionized our understanding of human diversity just over a decade ago. Such findings remind us that the picture we present here is not final, but evolving, just like the species it seeks to describe. In conclusion, the slow evolution of Homo sapiens is a profound narrative of patience, adaptation, and transformation. From small primates clinging to trees millions of years ago to modern humans capable of exploring outer space, the journey has been anything but simple. Yet what defines it most is its gradual pace. By appreciating this slowness, we come to understand not only where we came from, but also the processes that continue to shape us today. This introduction lays the groundwork for a detailed exploration of each stage of our evolutionary journey, beginning with the earliest primate ancestors and culminating in the emergence of modern humans and the civilizations they built. To understand the slow evolution of Homo sapiens, we must begin not with humans, nor even with our closest relatives among the great apes, but with the earliest primates. These small tree-dwelling mammals lived tens of millions of years ago in an Earth that looked profoundly different from today. Their story may feel remote, but it is essential, for it lays the biological foundation upon which all later hominins were. In Africa, ancestors of monkeys and apes thrived, while in South America, primates that had somehow crossed the Atlantic on floating vegetation gave rise to the New World monkeys. This geographic separation created two distinct evolutionary experiments. Old World monkeys and apes developed in Africa and Eurasia, while New World monkeys evolved independently in South America, resulting in differences such as prehensile tails in the latter. Humans belong firmly to the Old World lineage, but the broader diversity of primates reveals the adaptability and resilience of the order as a whole. The Miocene epoch 23.5 million years ago was perhaps the most crucial period for setting the stage for human evolution. During this era, the ancestors of modern apes emerged, including the lineages that would lead to gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. The fossil record includes genera such as Proconsul and Dryapithecus, which display combinations of monkey-like and ape-like features. These early apes were larger than earlier primates, with more flexible shoulders for swinging through trees and larger brains relative to body size. The Miocene was a golden age for apes, with dozens of species spread across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Yet, as climates shifted and forests gave way to more open environments, many of these species went extinct, leaving only a few surviving lineages. One of the most significant evolutionary developments during this period was the gradual shift toward upright posture. While Miocene apes were not yet fully bipedal, some species showed adaptations that would later facilitate walking on two legs. The reorientation of the pelvis, changes in limb proportions, and the flexibility of the spine all hinted at future possibilities. When environmental pressures forced some primates out of the trees and into more open landscapes, these latent traits provided the foundation for bipedalism, a defining hallmark of hominins. The slow pace of these changes is critical to emphasize. Over tens of millions of years, small genetic mutations accumulated, slightly altering anatomy and behavior. A slightly longer thumb here, a more forward-facing eye socket there. None of these changes by themselves created humans. But compounded over time, they built the biological toolkit that our ancestors would draw upon. This gradualism challenges our human desire for clear turning points or sudden leaps. Evolution operates on scales of time and patience that far exceed our everyday experience. The earliest primates did not know they were setting humanity's story in motion, but their adaptations were the first steps on the path. Modern humans still bear the imprint of our primate ancestry. Our five-fingered hands, our reliance on vision, our complex sociality, and even our curiosity about the world can be traced back to those early arboreal mammals. The fact that we share about 96% of our DNA with chimpanzees and around 93% with monkeys is a testament to this deep connection. We are, in a very real sense, highly specialized primates who have taken the basic template of the order and pushed it to extraordinary extremes. But we cannot appreciate this uniqueness without acknowledging the long prelude in which primates adapted, diversified, and survived in an ever-changing world. In conclusion, the earliest primates represent the dawn of the evolutionary journey toward humans. They were not human, nor even close, but they carried within them the seeds of humanity. Their adaptations to arboreal life, their reliance on vision, their dexterous hands, and their social behaviors were all critical preconditions for the later emergence of hominins. Without the slow, steady evolution of primates over tens of millions of years, Homo sapiens could never have existed. As we move forward in this exploration, we will see how these primate foundations gradually transformed into something more distinct. The first hominins who began walking upright, setting the stage for the next chapter in our story. The story of human evolution narrows in focus as we move from the general order of primates to the specific lineage that led to modern humans. One of the most significant turning points in this story is the divergence from the great apes. This split, occurring roughly 6 to 7 million years ago, represents the moment when our ancestors began to walk a path separate from chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. Understanding this divergence is critical because it highlights both what we share with other apes and what sets us apart. While humans are unique in many respects, our biology and behavior remain deeply entwined with those of our ape relatives, reflecting our common ancestry. To set the stage, it is important to recall that the great apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, orangutans, and humans are all members of the family Hominidae, This family is characterized by large body size, advanced cognitive abilities, long lifespans, and complex social structures. Genetic studies reveal that humans share about 98–99% of their DNA with chimpanzees and bonobos, making them our closest living relatives. Gorillas come next, sharing about 97–98%, while orangutans diverged earlier, sharing about 96%. These percentages may appear small in difference, but in evolutionary terms, they represent millions of years of separate adaptation, producing significant divergences in anatomy, behavior, and ecological niches. The divergence from the great apes is not a simple, clean break. Rather, it is a complex process that unfolded over millions of years, involving overlapping populations, hybridization, and gradual differentiation. Fossil evidence is scarce in this crucial period, but genetic clocks, methods of estimating divergence based on the accumulation of mutations, suggest that the human lineage split from the chimpanzee bonobo lineage around 6–7 million years ago. This date is supported by some of the earliest hominin fossils, such as Sahelanthropus techadensis, about 7 million years old, which exhibit a mix of ape-like and human-like traits. The presence of a relatively flat face and hints of bipedalism suggests that these early species were already experimenting with traits that would define hominins. What drove this divergence? One key factor was environmental change. Around 7 million years ago, Africa's climate began shifting from dense tropical forests to more varied landscapes, including woodlands and savannas. Populations of ancestral apes faced new challenges as their forest habitats contracted. Some groups adapted by remaining in the trees, leading to the modern chimpanzees and gorillas. Others began venturing into more open habitats where upright walking and other adaptations provided survival advantages. This ecological divergence created the selective pressures that gradually pulled populations apart, reinforcing differences in anatomy and behavior. One of the most significant adaptations during this divergence was the shift toward bipedalism. While chimpanzees and gorillas primarily used knuckle walking, early hominins began walking upright on two legs. This adaptation was not sudden, but incremental. Fossils such as Orontogenensis, about 6 million years old, and Ardipithecus ramidus, about 4.4 million years old, reveal a mosaic of features, pelvises, and femurs suggesting upright posture, but hands and feet still adapted for climbing. The advantages of bipedalism were numerous. It allowed early hominins to see over tall grass, carry food or tools, travel more efficiently across open ground, and regulate body temperature by reducing sun exposure. Each of these benefits may have played a role, though no single factor fully explains the transition. The divergence from great apes also involved changes in diet and dentition. Whereas chimpanzees and gorillas rely heavily on fruits, leaves, and other plant matter, early hominins began to consume a more varied diet, including tougher foods that required different chewing adaptations. Fossils show that early hominins had smaller canine teeth compared to apes, reflecting both dietary changes and shifts in social behavior. In many primates, large canines are used for dominance displays and competition among males. The reduction of canine size in hominins suggests a move toward less aggressive forms of social interaction, perhaps paving the way for greater cooperation within groups. The brain also began a slow but steady trajectory of change. Early hominins had brains only slightly larger than those of chimpanzees, around 400 cubic centimeters, but even modest increases in brain size may have facilitated more complex behaviors. Evidence from Ardipithecus and Australopithecus fossils suggests that early hominins engaged in forms of social cooperation and possibly rudimentary tool use, though not yet at the level seen in later species. These incremental changes highlight how evolution works, not through dramatic leaps, but through gradual accumulation of traits that, over time, produce profound differences. It is important to stress that the divergence from the great apes does not mean humans are more evolved or superior. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans have been evolving just as long as humans, adapting perfectly to their own ecological niches. In fact, in many ways, they are better adapted to their environments than we would be. The divergence simply represents different evolutionary paths taken by populations facing distinct challenges. The anthropocentric view that humans are the pinnacle of evolution distorts the reality. We are one branch among many, unique in some respects, but deeply connected to the broader primate family. The fossil discoveries of the past few decades have shed remarkable light on this divergence. Sahelanthropus tichidensis, discovered in Chad in 2001, is one of the oldest known potential hominins. Its skull suggests a mix of ape-like features, small brain, prominent brow ridges, and human-like traits, relatively flat face, possible upright posture. Similarly, Orantugenensis, discovered in Kenya in 2000, provides evidence of bipedalism through the structure of its thigh bone. Ardipithecus ramidus, discovered in Ethiopia in the 1990s, offers one of the most complete pictures of an early hominin, revealing a species that could walk upright, but also climb trees with grasping big toes. These fossils collectively illustrate the gradual nature of the split. No single species was fully human, but each carried forward elements that would eventually culminate in Homo sapiens. Another intriguing dimension of the divergence is the role of genetics and interbreeding. While much of our knowledge comes from fossils, genetic data suggests that early hominins and the ancestors of modern chimpanzees may have continued to interbreed even after their initial split. Some studies propose that the divergence was not a clean break but a prolonged process with episodes of hybridization. If true, this would mean that human evolution was even more complex than previously thought, involving a braided stream of lineages rather than a simple branching tree. The social and behavioral implications of this divergence are equally important. As early hominins adapted to new environments, they likely began forming more cohesive social groups. Cooperation in hunting, gathering, and protecting offspring may have provided survival advantages. These behaviors laid the foundation for later developments such as symbolic communication and cultural traditions. In this sense, the divergence from great apes was not just about anatomy or diet, but also about the gradual emergence of new ways of living together. In conclusion, the divergence from the great apes marks a critical juncture in the slow evolution of humans. It was during this period that our ancestors began to experiment with bipedalism, adapt to new diets, and form the social bonds that would become central to human survival. Though still very close to apes in appearance and behavior, these early hominins had embarked on a unique path. Their adaptations were modest in the short term, but over millions of years they accumulated into the distinctive features of Homo sapiens. By tracing this divergence, we gain a deeper appreciation for our shared ancestry with other apes and the long, gradual processes that made us who we are.
The emergence of the genus Australopithecus marks one of the most remarkable chapters in the slow evolution of humans. Existing between about 4.2 and 2 million years ago, the Australopithecines were among the earliest hominins to consistently practice bipedalism, walking upright on two legs. This shift in locomotion was revolutionary, setting the stage for all later developments in the human lineage. Though their brains were still relatively small and their behavior retained many ape-like traits, Australopithecines represent the first clear evidence that the human line was firmly diverging from other primates. To understand their significance, we must examine their anatomy, their ecological context, and their role in bridging the gap between earlier apes and later humans. The name Australopithecus means southern ape, reflecting the discovery of the first fossils in South Africa in the early 20th century. In 1924, Raymond Dart identified the famous Tongcheld, a small fossil skull belonging to Australopithecus africanus. At first, Dart's claim that this fossil represented an early human ancestor was met with skepticism. Many scientists of the time believed human origins would be found in Europe or Asia, not Africa. But over the decades, the discovery of more Australopithecine fossils confirmed Africa as the cradle of humankind and demonstrated that Dart had been correct. Anatomically, Australopithecines were a mosaic of ape-like and human-like traits. Their brains averaged around 400-500 cubic centimeters, only slightly larger than chimpanzees, and their faces projected forward with pronounced jaws. However, their pelvises, leg bones, and footprints clearly indicate habitual bipedalism. Perhaps the most famous evidence comes from the Latoli footprints in Tanzania discovered by Mary Leakey in 1976. Preserved in volcanic ash about 3.6 million years old, the footprints show a group of hominins walking upright side by side. Their stride and arch are unmistakably human, like providing striking proof that Australopithecines were already committed bipeds. The species Australopithecus afarensis, best represented by the fossil skeleton Lucy, discovered in Ethiopia in 1974, is among the best known Australopithecines. Lucy's skeleton, about 40% complete, revealed adaptations for both walking upright and climbing trees. Her pelvis and femur show that she could walk efficiently on two legs, but her long arms and curved fingers suggest she still spent significant time in the trees. This dual adaptation illustrates the transitional nature of Australopithecines. They had not fully abandoned their arboreal heritage, but were increasingly adapted to life on the ground. Such versatility likely helped them survive in varied environments. The shift to bipedalism brought numerous advantages. Walking upright freed the hands for carrying objects, using tools, and eventually making gestures. It also allowed for greater energy efficiency when traveling long distances, a crucial benefit in open savanna environments where food and water were scattered. Moreover, upright posture helped regulate body temperature by reducing sun exposure and increasing air circulation over the body. However, bipedalism also came with costs, including back pain, knee problems, and difficulties during childbirth due to the narrower pelvis required for efficient walking. Evolution is always a trade-off, and in the case of Australopithecines, the benefits of bipedalism outweighed its drawbacks. The environment in which Australopithecines lived was dynamic and challenging. Between 4 and 2 million years ago, Africa's climate fluctuated dramatically, alternating between wetter and drier periods. Forests expanded and contracted, giving way to grasslands and savannas. Australopithecines adapted to this variability by being flexible in diet and habitat. Their teeth and jaws suggest they consumed a wide range of foods from fruits and leaves to seeds, nuts, and possibly small animals. Some species, like Australopithecus robustus and Australopithecus boisei, developed massive jaws and molars adapted for chewing tough vegetation. Others, like A. afarensis, retain more generalized dentition. This diversity demonstrates how natural selection produced different survival strategies within the Australopithecine lineage. Socially, Australopithecines were likely more complex than earlier apes, but not as sophisticated as later humans. Evidence from fossil assemblages suggests they lived in groups, perhaps for protection against predators and cooperative foraging. Their smaller canine teeth compared to apes indicate reduced aggression and possibly more egalitarian social structures. While they may not have had language as we know it, vocal communication and gestures would have played crucial roles in maintaining group cohesion. These behaviors, though speculative, hint at the social foundations upon which human cooperation would later be built. One of the most fascinating aspects of Australopithecines is their potential use of tools. While stone tools are not definitively associated with them, evidence from bones with cut marks dating back 3.4 million years suggests that Australopithecines may have used sharp stones to process meat. This predates the earliest confirmed stone tools, known as the Oldowan industry, about 2.6 million years ago, usually linked to Homo habilis. If Australopithecines were indeed using tools, even in rudimentary ways, it highlights the gradual emergence of technological behavior long before the genus Homo. The use of tools would have expanded dietary options, allowing access to marrow and meat, which may have contributed to brain development in later species. Australopithecines also highlight the experimental nature of evolution. Several species existed at different times and places, each with unique adaptations. A. afarensis in East Africa, A. africanus in South Africa, and the robust Australopithecines in East and Southern Africa represent different branches of the family tree. Not all of these lineages led to humans. Indeed, the robust forms eventually went extinct without descendants. But their existence demonstrates how evolution works through trial and error, with some experiments succeeding while others fade away. Humans are not the inevitable outcome, but one of many possibilities explored by nature. The discovery and study of Australopithecines also transformed scientific and public understanding of human origins. Before their fossils were found, many imagined human ancestors as essentially apes who suddenly became intelligent. Australopithecines revealed that the story was far more gradual. They showed that bipedalism preceded large brains, overturning assumptions that intelligence was the first step toward humanity. Instead, walking upright came millions of years before significant brain expansion, emphasizing the slow, stepwise nature of evolution. In sum, Australopithecus represents a crucial stage in the human story. These bipedal pioneers embodied the first clear separation from our ape relatives, adapting to life both in trees and on the ground. Their anatomy reveals the trade-offs of bipedalism, their ecology shows flexibility and resilience, and their diversity illustrates the branching complexity of evolution. Though they lacked the intelligence and culture of modern humans, they set in motion the changes that would ultimately lead to us. Without Australopithecines, there would be no humans. They are not simply a footnote in our history, but a foundational chapter, demonstrating how small adaptations accumulate over time into profound transformations.
The transition from Australopithecines to the genus Homo marks another pivotal step in the slow evolution of humans. Among the earliest members of this new genus was Homo habilis, often nicknamed the handy-mandy-man for its association with the first stone tools. Living about 2.4 to 1.6 million years ago in Africa, Homo habilis bridges the gap between more primitive Australopithecines and more advanced species such as Homo erectus. Though still small-brained and somewhat ape-like in appearance, Homo habilis exhibited innovations that would set the human lineage apart forever. Systematic tool-making, dietary expansion, and increasing cognitive complexity. Their emergence demonstrates how evolutionary pressures favored ingenuity as much as anatomy. The discovery of Homo habilis was made in the early 1960s by Louis and Mary Leakey at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. Fossilized skulls, jaws, and hand bones indicated a species with a slightly larger brain than Australopithecines, around 600-700 cubic centimeters compared to 400-500. This brain expansion, though modest, signaled a new trajectory in human evolution. The Leakeys also found stone tools in the same layers, leading them to conclude that Homo habilis was the maker of these implements. The association between bigger brains and tool-making became central to our understanding of what distinguished Homo from earlier hominins. The tools themselves, known as the Oldowan industry, were simple but revolutionary. Oldowan tools consisted of stone flakes struck from larger cores, creating sharp edges used for cutting meat, cracking bones, and processing plants. While chimpanzees use sticks and rocks in rudimentary ways, the deliberate shaping of stones by Homo habilis represents a qualitative leap. These tools expanded dietary options, allowing early humans to scavenge carcasses, access nutrient-rich marrow, and exploit a wider range of foods. Meat consumption, in turn, may have provided the protein and calories necessary for continued brain growth in later species. Thus, tool-making and brain development formed a feedback loop that would define human evolution. Anatomically, Homo habilis still retained many Australopithecine features. They were short, averaging about 1.3 meters, 4 feet in height, with long arms and curved fingers suggesting they still climbed trees. Their faces were prognathous, projecting forward, and their jaws and teeth, while smaller than Australopithecines, were still robust compared to modern humans. Yet their hand bones show greater precision grip capabilities, indicating adaptations for manipulating objects. This combination of ape-like and human-like traits underscores their transitional status. Not fully human, but not entirely ape-like either. The lifestyle of Homo habilis was shaped by both opportunity and danger. They lived in environments where predators such as big cats, hyenas, and crocodiles posed constant threats. Stone tools gave them new survival strategies, but they were likely scavengers as much as hunters, relying on opportunistic access to animal remains. Cooperation within groups would have been essential, not only for protection, but also for sharing food and transmitting knowledge about tool making. These behaviors foreshadowed the more complex social dynamics of later humans. The significance of Homo habilis extends beyond its biology. The creation of tools represents the dawn of culture, behaviors transmitted not genetically but through learning and imitation. While genetic evolution is slow, cultural transmission can occur rapidly, allowing innovations to spread within and between groups. In this sense, Homo habilis inaugurated a new mode of evolution, cultural evolution layered upon biological evolution. This dual process would accelerate human development far beyond what biology alone could achieve. There is, however, ongoing debate about the exact status of Homo habilis. Some scientists argue that the fossils attributed to this species represent more than one distinct type of hominin, possibly including early Homo erectus. Others suggest that Homo habilis was too primitive to belong in the genus Homo at all, proposing instead that it should remain within Australopithecus. These debates highlight the complexity of classifying transitional species. Evolution does not produce neat categories, but rather blurred continua where species overlap and intergrade. Despite these uncertainties, Homo habilis occupies an important symbolic place in our understanding of human origins. They embody the moment when our ancestors began to actively shape their world with tools, opening possibilities that would transform survival strategies forever. While still physically closer to Australopithecines, their mental and cultural steps were momentous. The dawn of tool use was not just a practical innovation. It was the beginning of a journey toward technology, art, and science. In summary, Homo habilis represents the dawn of ingenuity in the human story. Their simple stone tools signaled a new reliance on technology, their slightly larger brains marked a new cognitive direction, and their social behaviors foreshadowed the complexity of later humans. They remind us that evolution is not a sudden leap from ape to human, but a slow, layered process in which small innovations accumulate into transformative changes. Without the handiwork of Homo habilis, the grand achievements of human civilization would have been impossible. The emergence of Homo erectus represents one of the most transformative stages in the slow evolution of humanity. Existing from about 1.9 million years ago until as recently as 110,000 years ago in some regions, Homo erectus was an extraordinarily successful species. They spread farther than any of their predecessors, leaving Africa and populating vast areas of Eurasia. They mastered fire, developed more sophisticated tools, and exhibited behaviors that marked a decisive step toward modern human life. In many ways, Homo erectus was the first true global pioneer, paving the way for the eventual spread of Homo sapiens. Their story reveals how adaptability, cooperation, and innovation allowed humans to move beyond Africa and thrive in diverse and often challenging environments. The discovery of Homo erectus dates back to the late 19th century, when fossils were unearthed on the island of Java in Indonesia. Dubbed a Java Man by Dutch anatomist Eugene Dubois in 1891, the find included a skull cap and thigh bone that clearly belonged to a bipedal hominin. At the time, the idea that humans had ancient ancestors living in Asia was revolutionary. Later discoveries in China, particularly the famous Epeking manna fossils at Zhuqiang, reinforced the widespread presence of Homo erectus. Over time, fossils from Africa, the Middle East, and Europe revealed that this species had an enormous geographic range, unmatched by any earlier hominin. Anatomically, Homo erectus showed significant advances over Homo habilis and Australopithecines. Their brains averaged around 1100 cubic centimeters, nearly double that of Australopithecines, and approaching the lower range of modern humans. This brain expansion was accompanied by a reduction in facial projection, smaller teeth, and a more modern body shape. Unlike earlier hominins, Homo erectus had long legs and short arms, proportions suited for efficient walking and running. Their height, often over 1.6 meters, 5 feet 3 inches for males, made them taller and more robust than their predecessors. These traits indicate that Homo erectus was fully adapted to life on the ground rather than in the trees. One of the defining achievements of Homo erectus was their tool technology. While Homo habilis had relied on simple Oldowan tools, Homo erectus developed the Acheulean industry, characterized by carefully shaped hand axes and cleavers. These tools required skill and planning to produce, reflecting advances in cognitive ability. The symmetrical design of Acheulean tools suggests that Homo erectus possessed an early sense of aesthetics, or at least an appreciation for efficiency and form. With these tools, they could butcher large animals, process plant materials, and perform a variety of tasks that expanded their ecological opportunities. Perhaps the most profound innovation attributed to Homo erectus was the control of fire. Evidence from sites such as Zhuqiang in China and Wonderwork Cave in South Africa suggests that they were using fire as early as 1 million years ago. Fire revolutionized human life. It provided warmth in cold climates, extended the day by offering light, and protected groups from predators. Most importantly, it allowed the cooking of food, making nutrients more accessible and reducing the energy required for digestion. This dietary shift may have contributed to further brain growth, creating a feedback loop between technology, diet, and cognition. Cooking also encouraged social gathering around campfires, strengthening bonds and fostering communication. The mastery of fire also facilitated migration. Homo erectus was the first hominin to leave Africa, spreading into Asia and Europe. Their dispersal demonstrates extraordinary adaptability to varied environments, from the tropical forests of Southeast Asia to the temperate zones of Europe. This expansion was not a single wave, but likely multiple migrations over hundreds of thousands of years. Such mobility required not only physical endurance, but also social organization. Groups of Homo erectus would have needed to cooperate in hunting, foraging, and protecting one another in unfamiliar landscapes. Dietary flexibility was another key to their success. With their improved tools and use of fire, Homo erectus consumed a wider variety of foods than any previous hominin. They hunted game, scavenged carcasses, gathered fruits and roots, and cooked meals. This omnivorous diet enabled them to thrive in diverse habitats. Fossil evidence of butchered bones indicates that they regularly processed large animals, suggesting coordinated hunting or at least systematic scavenging. Such behaviors imply greater planning, cooperation, and communication within groups. Socially and cognitively, Homo erectus exhibited behaviors hinting at emerging complexity. While they lacked language in the modern sense, they likely used a combination of vocalizations, gestures, and facial expressions to communicate. The organization required for hunting and tool production suggests a capacity for shared attention and learning. The extended childhood of Homo erectus, due to their larger brains, would have encouraged prolonged parental care and social teaching. These dynamics laid the groundwork for the cultural evolution that would later define Homo sapiens. The longevity of Homo erectus as a species is also remarkable. They survived for over 1.5 million years, far longer than modern humans have so far existed. Their resilience speaks to the effectiveness of their adaptations, yet eventually they disappeared, replaced by more advanced hominins such as Neanderthals and modern humans. The reasons for their extinction are not fully understood. Some populations may have been unable to compete with later species in certain environments, while others may have gradually interbred or been assimilated. Their disappearance underscores the fragile balance of survival in the evolutionary process. Even successful species eventually give way to new forms. The significance of Homo erectus cannot be overstated. They represent the first hominin to combine modern body proportions, significant brain expansion, sophisticated tool making, mastery of fire, and global migration. Each of these innovations marked a step toward modern humanity, but together they created a transformative leap. While still distinct from Homo sapiens in many ways, Homo erectus embodies the essence of what it means to be human: adaptability, cooperation, and ingenuity. They were not merely surviving, they were actively reshaping their world. In reflecting on Homo erectus, we are reminded of the slow cumulative nature of evolution. The hand axes did not appear overnight but evolved from simpler tools through countless generations of trial and error. Fire was not mastered in a single moment but learned and relearned across time and space. Migration was not a grand exodus but a gradual expansion, step by step, over hundreds of thousands of years. The greatness of Homo erectus lies not in sudden revolutions, but in steady progress, the hallmark of human evolution. In conclusion, Homo erectus stands as one of the most important species in the human story. Their mastery of tools, control of fire, and global migration demonstrated capacities that would define humanity. They were pioneers in the truest sense, venturing into new lands and pushing the boundaries of what was possible for a hominin. Without Homo erectus, the later emergence of Homo sapiens would have been impossible. They represent not just a stage in evolution, but a legacy of resilience, innovation, and exploration that continues to define us today. The story of the Neanderthals is one of fascination, complexity, and tragedy. For decades, they were caricatured as brutish, unintelligent, and doomed to extinction. Today, however, a very different picture has emerged thanks to groundbreaking fossil discoveries, archaeological sites, and advances in genetics. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, were not simply primitive cave dwellers. They were highly adapted, intelligent, and resourceful humans who lived across Europe and parts of Western Asia for over 300,000 years. They thrived in harsh Ice Age environments, developed complex tools, practiced symbolic behavior, and even interbred with our species, leaving a genetic legacy in modern humans. Their story is not one of failure, but of resilience and kinship, as they represent our closest cousins on the evolutionary tree. Neanderthals were first identified in 1856, when workers in Germany's Neander Valley discovered strange skeletal remains. Initially, scientists debated whether these bones belonged to a pathological modern human or a distinct species. Over time, with additional discoveries across Europe and the Middle East, it became clear that Neanderthals were indeed a separate branch of the human family tree. They evolved from earlier populations of Homo heidelbergensis around 400,000 years ago, adapting specifically to the cold climates of Ice Age Europe. Their survival in such challenging conditions speaks volumes about their ingenuity and adaptability. Anatomically, Neanderthals were distinct but unmistakably human. They had robust, heavily muscled bodies with short limbs, adaptations for conserving heat in cold climates. Their skulls were large with low foreheads, prominent brow ridges, and projecting midfaces. Yet their brains averaged about 1,500 cubic centimeters, often larger than those of modern humans. This suggests that Neanderthals were not lacking in intelligence but may have organized their cognitive capacities differently. Their powerful bodies made them effective hunters, while their large brains supported complex social structures and cultural practices. One of the defining characteristics of Neanderthals was their tool-making ability. They developed the Mousterian tool culture, characterized by carefully shaped flake tools produced using the Levallois technique. This method required planning, precision, and skill, as it involved preparing a stone core from which standardized flakes could be struck. These tools were versatile, used for cutting meat, scraping hides, shaping wood, and other tasks. Evidence also shows that Neanderthals sometimes hafted their stone tools onto wooden handles, creating spears and other composite tools. This innovation reflects not just technical ability but also foresight and problem solving. Neanderthals were also skilled hunters who targeted large Ice Age animals such as mammoths, bison, and woolly rhinoceroses. They likely used close-range thrusting spears, which required courage and cooperation. Such hunting strategies imply coordinated group behavior and possibly roles within communities. In addition to hunting, Neanderthals gathered plant foods, nuts, and possibly medicinal herbs. Evidence of cooked plant remains at some sites suggests that they controlled fire and may have had diverse diets. Far from being primitive scavengers, Neanderthals were versatile foragers capable of surviving in some of the harshest climates in prehistory. Fire played a central role in Neanderthal life. Hearths have been found at many of their sites, indicating that they cooked food, warmed shelters, and perhaps used fire for protection. The presence of burnt bones and stone tools near these hearths suggests communal activities centered around fire, much like later humans gathering around campfires. Fire also had social significance, creating spaces for storytelling, teaching, and bonding. These practices reflect a level of cultural complexity that goes beyond mere survival. Perhaps the most intriguing aspects of Neanderthal life are the cultural and symbolic behaviors they practiced. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthals buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods or deliberate placement of bodies. While the extent of symbolic meaning in these burials is debated, intentional burial suggests at least a rudimentary sense of ritual or respect for the dead. Some sites also reveal the use of pigments such as ochre, possibly for body painting or decoration. In Spain, cave art dating back over 60,000 years has been attributed to Neanderthals, including abstract shapes and hand stencils. These findings challenge the long-standing belief that symbolic thought was unique to Homo sapiens. Neanderthals also exhibited signs of social care and compassion. Fossils of injured or disabled individuals show evidence of long-term survival, indicating that they were cared for by their groups. For example, the famous Ishanadar 1ES skeleton from Iraq reveals an individual who lived for years despite being blind in one eye, missing an arm, and suffering from other ailments. Such survival would not have been possible without the support of others. This compassion highlights the emotional and cooperative capacities of Neanderthals, reinforcing their humanity. Despite their many strengths, Neanderthals eventually disappeared around 40,000 years ago. The reasons for their extinction remain one of the great mysteries of prehistory. Several theories have been proposed. One suggests competition with modern humans, who arrived in Europe around the same time, may have displaced Neanderthals through superior technology, larger social networks, or greater adaptability. Another theory emphasizes climate change. The rapidly fluctuating conditions of the late Ice Age may have stressed Neanderthal populations beyond recovery. Yet another possibility is that interbreeding with Homo sapiens gradually absorbed Neanderthal populations into ours, rather than a complete extinction. Genetics has provided extraordinary insights into the fate of the Neanderthals. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, revealing that non-African modern humans carry between 1–4% of Neanderthal DNA. This proves that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred multiple times after Homo sapiens left Africa around 60,000 years ago. This genetic legacy influences traits in modern humans today, including aspects of our immune system, skin, hair, and even disease susceptibility. Far from being extinct in the strict sense, Neanderthals live on within us, shaping our biology in subtle but important ways. The re-evaluation of Neanderthals also carries profound cultural implications. For much of the 20th century, they were portrayed as inferior to modern humans. A failed experiment in evolution. Today, we recognize that this view reflected biases rather than evidence. Neanderthals were not failures, but survivors who thrived for hundreds of thousands of years in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Their disappearance was not inevitable, but the result of complex factors, including interactions with us. Rather than distant and alien, Neanderthals were remarkably similar to us, sharing intelligence, creativity, and emotional depth. In many ways, studying Neanderthals is like holding up a mirror to ourselves. They force us to confront questions about what it means to be human. If they buried their dead, used art, and cared for the sick, then the boundary between them and us becomes blurred. Instead of a sharp line, there is continuity, a shared humanity that transcends species boundaries. Their story reminds us that human evolution was not a linear progression toward modern humans, but a branching tree with multiple flourishing lineages, of which Neanderthals were a vital part. In conclusion, the Neanderthals were far more than the stereotypes of brutish cave dwellers suggest. They were skilled hunters, capable toolmakers, and cultural beings who displayed compassion and creativity. They adapted to Ice Age Europe with resilience, leaving behind a legacy of survival and kinship. Though they disappeared as a distinct species, they endure within our genes and our shared history. To dismiss them as failures is to misunderstand the richness of human evolution. Instead, we should see them as a testament to the diversity of humanity and as a reminder that our story is not one of dominance alone, but of shared origins and intertwined destinies. If Neanderthals are our well-known cousins, then Denisovans are our mysterious, shadowy relatives, enigmatic figures revealed only recently through science. Unlike Neanderthals, who left behind numerous fossils and artifacts, Denisovans are known from just a handful of physical remains: a finger bone, a few teeth, and fragments of skulls discovered in Denisova Cave in Siberia. Yet from this limited evidence, scientists have reconstructed an astonishing story. Denisovans were a distinct human population that split from Neanderthals hundreds of thousands of years ago and spread across Asia, interbreeding with modern humans along the way. Their genetic legacy lives on today, especially in populations of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania, where Denisovan DNA influences traits as profound as altitude adaptation and immune system strength. They remind us that human evolution was not a simple tale of replacement, but a tapestry woven from multiple overlapping lineages. The discovery of Denisovans was as unexpected as it was revolutionary. In 2008, Russian archaeologists excavating Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains unearthed a tiny finger bone belonging to a young girl who lived around 40,000 years ago. At first glance, the fragment looked unremarkable, indistinguishable from a modern human or Neanderthal. But when scientists sequenced its DNA in 2010, they were stunned. It represented a previously unknown branch of the human family tree. Named after the cave, the Denisovans immediately transformed our understanding of human diversity in the late Pleistocene. Since then, a few more fossils, molars and a jawbone found in Tibet, have been attributed to Denisovans, but the species remains largely a genetic mystery. Genetic analysis revealed that Denisovans were closely related to Neanderthals, sharing a common ancestor around 400,000 to 500,000 years ago. While Neanderthals spread across Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans appear to have occupied much of Asia, from Siberia to Southeast Asia, and possibly beyond. They may have thrived in diverse environments, from the cold steppes of Siberia to the high-altitude plateaus of Tibet. This wide geographic range suggests they were highly adaptable, much like Neanderthals and modern humans. However, because their fossil record is so sparse, reconstructing their appearance and culture remains a challenge. Based on DNA comparisons, Denisovans may have had traits overlapping both Neanderthals and modern humans, though they were genetically distinct enough to be considered a separate lineage. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Denisovans is their genetic legacy in modern humans. Populations in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. In some groups, particularly Melanesians and Australian Aboriginals, the proportion is especially high, suggesting substantial interbreeding in those regions. One of the most famous examples of Denisovan influence is the EPA-SON gene, found in Tibetans, which enhances the ability to live at high altitudes by regulating oxygen use in the blood. This gene variant is virtually absent in other human populations, but was inherited from Denisovans, demonstrating how ancient interbreeding shaped the survival of modern humans in extreme environments. Other Denisovan genes affect immune responses, skin pigmentation, and even metabolism, contributing to the diversity of human traits today. The limited archaeological record leaves many unanswered questions about Denisovan culture and behavior. Did they create tools similar to Neanderthals, or did they develop their own technologies? Did they practice symbolic behaviors such as art or burial rituals? The few tools found in Denisova Cave, including stone blades and ornaments, suggest a level of sophistication comparable to Neanderthals and early modern humans. Some artifacts even include finely crafted jewelry, such as a green stone bracelet, which could indicate symbolic expression. However, without more fossils and sites, it remains difficult to draw firm conclusions. Denisovans are like a puzzle with most of the pieces missing, forcing scientists to rely on genetic clues and indirect evidence. The relationship between Denisovans, Neanderthals, and modern humans illustrates the complex web of interactions that characterized human evolution. Far from existing in isolation, these groups overlapped, encountered one another, and interbred multiple times. In fact, DNA evidence suggests that Denisovans themselves interbred with Neanderthals, as well as with at least one other mysterious archaic human group, perhaps a yet undiscovered lineage. This interwoven pattern challenges the simplistic view of evolution as a ladder of progress and instead highlights it as a network of branches, with lineages diverging and reconnecting over hundreds of thousands of years. The Denisovans' disappearance around 40,000 years ago raises the same questions faced with Neanderthals. Did they vanish due to competition with Homo sapiens? Were they absorbed through interbreeding? Or did climate and environmental pressures simply overwhelm their populations? It is likely a combination of factors. As modern humans spread through Asia, they may have displaced Denisovan groups, outcompeted them technologically, or assimilated them genetically. In the end, Denisovans disappeared as a distinct group, but their genetic traces ensure that they remain a living part of our species. From a broader perspective, the Denisovan discovery revolutionized how we think about ourselves. Before 2010, the dominant narrative was that modern humans left Africa, encountered Neanderthals in Europe, and replaced them. The idea of a third major human lineage in Asia was scarcely considered. Yet Denisovans proved that the world was far more complex, populated by multiple human species coexisting, competing, and cooperating. This complexity reflects not just biological variation, but cultural diversity, different ways of living, surviving, and adapting. Denisovans, though largely invisible in the archaeological record, remind us that our species' journey was never solitary. Another striking lesson from Denisovans is the power of genetics in uncovering the past. A single fragment of bone, invisible to the naked eye, revealed the existence of an entire population, Advances in ancient DNA extraction and sequencing have opened new windows into prehistory, allowing us to reconstruct relationships that would otherwise remain hidden. Denisovans are a testament to the fact that our understanding of human evolution is still evolving, shaped by discoveries that can overturn established narratives in an instant. Who knows how many more ghost populations may yet be revealed through DNA. Culturally and symbolically, the Denisovans challenge us to reconsider the boundaries of humanity. If they interbred with us, contributed to our survival, and possibly created art and jewelry, were they not, in essence, human too? The categories we draw, Neanderthal, Denisovan, Homo sapiens, are useful for science, but in lived reality, these groups overlapped, blurred, and shared in the same human experience. The story of Denisovans is not just about a lost people. It is about us and how we are shaped by the invisible threads of ancestry. In conclusion, the Denisovans stand as one of the most intriguing chapters in the slow evolution of Homo sapiens. With only a few fossils, they have revealed a vast and hidden dimension of our history, one that continues to shape our bodies and lives today. Their genetic legacy in modern humans demonstrates that they were not merely an extinct species, but active participants in the human story. Though mysterious and elusive, Denisovans embody the richness and complexity of human evolution, reminding us that we are the product not of one lineage but of many, interwoven over deep time. Their shadowy presence challenges us to embrace a broader, more inclusive understanding of what it means to be human. The arrival of Homo sapiens marks one of the most transformative turning points in the evolutionary story of humankind. Though we are accustomed to seeing ourselves as the pinnacle of this journey, the truth is far more intricate and humbling. Our species, which emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago, was not the inevitable outcome of evolution, but the result of countless contingencies, adaptations, and interactions with other hominins. Homo sapiens were not alone when they appeared. They shared the planet with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly other unknown groups. What set them apart was not brute strength or even larger brains, since Neanderthals had bigger ones, but an extraordinary capacity for adaptability, symbolic thought, social cooperation, and innovation. The dawn of Homo sapiens represents the dawn of a species uniquely capable of reshaping both environment and self. The earliest fossils attributed to Homo sapiens come from Gebel Irhoud in Morocco, dating back about 300,000 years. These remains show a combination of archaic and modern traits, elongated skulls with brow ridges but faces closer to modern humans. Other fossils, such as those from Omo Kibish in Ethiopia, about 195,000 years old, further confirm Africa as the cradle of our species. These finds demonstrate that Homo sapiens evolved gradually from earlier African populations of Homo heidelbergensis or closely related forms, with multiple groups contributing to the gene pool. In fact, the evolutionary emergence of modern humans was not a sudden event, but a drawn-out process spanning hundreds of thousands of years, marked by the gradual accumulation of anatomical and behavioral traits. Anatomically, early Homo sapiens were distinguished by lighter skeletons, smaller brow ridges, and rounded skulls with high foreheads. Their brains, averaging about 1350 cubic centimeters, were slightly smaller than Neanderthals but organized differently, with greater emphasis on regions associated with symbolic and abstract thought. This reorganization may have provided the cognitive flexibility needed for language, art, and cultural complexity. Physically, their slender bodies made them well-suited for endurance running and long-distance travel, giving them an advantage in hunting and migration. These traits were critical in enabling Homo sapiens to adapt to diverse environments. One of the defining features of Homo sapiens was behavioral modernity, the suite of cultural traits that allowed them to innovate, cooperate, and create. Archaeological evidence suggests that symbolic behavior, long thought unique to modern humans, was already emerging in Africa before 100,000 years ago. Sites like Blombo's Cave in South Africa contain engraved ochre pieces, shell beads, and bone tools dating back over 70,000 years, all of which point to symbolic expression. Such behaviors reflect abstract thought, identity formation, and communication, hallmarks of modern humanity. These developments suggest that Homo sapiens were not simply anatomically modern, but cognitively and culturally distinct. Another crucial innovation was language. While the exact timing of its emergence is debated, many scholars believe that Homo sapiens developed complex spoken language capable of conveying abstract ideas, narratives, and instruction. This ability transforms social life, enabling larger groups to cooperate, transmit knowledge, and build shared traditions. Language may have been the single most powerful adaptation of our species, allowing us to preserve ideas across generations and expand our collective intelligence beyond the limits of individual memory. The dawn of Homo sapiens also saw the beginnings of long-distance exchange networks. Archaeological finds show that raw materials such as obsidian and shells were transported over hundreds of kilometers, suggesting that early humans engaged in trade or symbolic exchange. These networks not only spread resources but also ideas and cultural practices, weaving early communities into broader social webs. Unlike Neanderthals, whose groups appear to have been relatively isolated, Homo sapiens maintained connections that allowed them to adapt more flexibly to environmental challenges. The question of why Homo sapiens eventually outcompeted other hominins remains one of the great debates in anthropology. The answer likely lies not in a single trait, but in a combination of cognitive, social, and technological advantages. Homo sapiens were generalists, capable of exploiting a wide range of resources and environments. Their symbolic capacities allowed them to form complex identities and cultures. Their cooperation enabled them to outcompete rivals in both hunting and survival. Ultimately, the dawn of Homo sapiens was not about superiority in strength, but in adaptability and innovation. This beginning set the stage for the next great chapter, the migrations that would carry our species out of Africa and across the world. One of the most dramatic and consequential events in human history was the migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa and their subsequent spread across the globe. Known as the Out of Africa model, this process began around 60,000, 70,000 years ago, although earlier dispersals may have occurred. It was during this period that humans embarked on journeys that would take them into Asia, Europe, Oceania, and eventually the Americas. This migration was not a single exodus, but a series of movements, sometimes advancing, sometimes retreating, shaped by climate, geography, and encounters with other hominins. The Great Migration transformed Homo sapiens from a regional species into a global one, laying the foundations for the diversity of cultures and populations we see today. The driving forces behind this migration were complex. Climate played a significant role as glacial and interglacial cycles opened and closed routes out of Africa. Around 70,000 years ago, a population bottleneck may have reduced the number of humans to a small, vulnerable group, perhaps only a few thousand individuals. This founder population carried with it the genetic blueprint for all non-African humans alive today. Equipped with symbolic culture, language, and advanced tools, these humans were uniquely prepared to expand into new lands. The initial dispersals likely followed coastal routes along the Red Sea, Arabian Peninsula, and into South Asia. Archaeological evidence from sites in Arabia and India suggests that humans were present there by 65,000 years ago. From South Asia, some groups continued eastward into Southeast Asia and Australia, reaching these regions by about 50,000 years ago. Others moved northward into Central Asia and Europe, where they encountered and interbred with Neanderthals. The migration into Europe, beginning around 45,000 years ago, eventually led to the replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans, though not before significant interbreeding left its genetic legacy. Crossing into Oceania represents one of the most remarkable feats of early human migration. By 50,000 years ago, humans had reached Australia and New Guinea, despite the need to cross significant stretches of open water. This demonstrates not only advanced seafaring abilities, but also the planning and cooperation required for such journeys. These populations adapted to diverse environments, from tropical rainforests to arid deserts, showcasing the unparalleled flexibility of Homo sapiens. In Oceania, Denisovan DNA is especially prominent, suggesting that interbreeding occurred along the way. The peopling of the Americas came much later, likely around 15,000 20,000 years ago, though some evidence hints at earlier arrivals. During the Ice Age, lower sea levels exposed land bridges, such as Beringia, connecting Siberia and Alaska. Small groups of humans crossed these routes and gradually spread southward, eventually populating the entire continent. Within a few thousand years, humans had reached the southern tip of South America, adapting to environments as varied as Arctic tundras and tropical rainforests. The rapid spread reflects both the ingenuity and determination of our species. Throughout these migrations, humans not only spread geographically, but also diversified culturally. As groups became isolated in different regions, they developed unique traditions, languages, and technologies. The genetic diversity we see today reflects these ancient dispersals, shaped by adaptation to local environments and occasional interbreeding with archaic humans. Indeed, the journey out of Africa was not a story of replacing other species outright, but of mingling, absorbing, and adapting. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly other unknown groups became part of us, enriching our genetic heritage. The Great Migration also had profound ecological consequences. Wherever humans arrived, they left their mark on local ecosystems. In Australia, the arrival of humans may have contributed to the extinction of megafauna such as giant kangaroos and marsupial lions. In the Americas, similar extinctions occurred, with mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths disappearing within a few thousand years of human arrival. While climate change played a role, the spread of humans introduced new pressures through hunting and habitat alteration. This marks the beginning of a long history of human impact on the natural world, a theme that continues to this day. The out-of-Africa migration highlights the extraordinary adaptability of Homo sapiens. Unlike other hominins who remained confined to limited regions, our species crossed deserts, mountains, oceans, and ice sheets. Each step of the journey required new strategies, tools, and cultural practices. What made this possible was not individual strength, but collective innovation and cooperation. The Great Migration was a triumph of social and cultural evolution as much as biological. It laid the foundation for global human diversity, shaping the story of humanity as a shared but varied journey. Once Homo sapiens spread across the globe, their survival depended on adapting to vastly different environments. From scorching deserts to icy tundras, from high mountains to dense jungles, humans encountered conditions that tested their resilience and ingenuity. Unlike other animals, who relied primarily on biological adaptation through natural selection, humans combined biological flexibility with cultural innovation. This dual capacity allowed them to thrive in environments where physical evolution alone would have been too slow. The story of human adaptation is therefore a story of clothing, shelter tools, social systems, and symbolic culture as much as genes and physiology. Biologically, humans adapted in subtle but significant ways. Skin color, for instance, evolved in response to varying levels of ultraviolet radiation. Populations near the equator developed darker skin to protect against intense sun exposure, while populations in northern latitudes evolved lighter skin to maximize vitamin D synthesis. Similarly, body shapes evolved according to climate. Populations in cold regions tended to have stockier builds to conserve heat, while those in hot regions developed leaner physiques to dissipate it. These adaptations reflect the remarkable plasticity of human biology. Yet the most powerful adaptations were cultural. Clothing, first made from animal hides, allowed humans to survive in freezing environments. The invention of tailored clothing, using needles made of bone and ivory, was especially critical in Ice Age Europe. Shelter, too, evolved from temporary huts to more permanent structures, enabling humans to endure harsh climates. Fire, already mastered by earlier hominins, was refined and controlled for warmth, cooking, and protect. These innovations illustrate how culture extended human biology, creating an extra layer of adaptation that was faster and more versatile than evolution alone. Dietary adaptations also played a key role. Humans developed diverse food strategies depending on their environment. In the Arctic, Inuit populations relied on high-fat diets from marine animals, while in tropical regions, communities thrived on plant-based diets rich in carbohydrates. Lactose tolerance evolved in populations that domesticated animals, allowing adults to digest milk. Similarly, the ability to digest starch efficiently became common in agricultural societies. These dietary shifts demonstrate the interplay of culture and genetics. Practices such as herding or farming created new selective pressures that shaped human biology. High-altitude adaptation provides a striking example of human flexibility. Populations in Tibet, the Andes, and Ethiopia developed distinct genetic adaptations to cope with low oxygen levels. The Tibetan variant of the EPA-SON gene, inherited from Denisovans, allows efficient use of oxygen without producing dangerous levels of red blood cells. In contrast, Andean populations adapted by increasing hemoglobin levels. These differences show that humans found multiple evolutionary solutions to the same challenge, guided by local environments and histories. Social and symbolic adaptations were equally important. Humans developed kinship systems, rituals, and traditions that fostered cooperation and resilience. Storytelling, myth, and religion help bind groups together, providing shared meaning and moral frameworks. Music, dance, and art reinforced group identity and communication. These symbolic systems were not luxuries but essential survival tools, enabling larger and more cohesive groups to coordinate, defend resources, and share knowledge. In this sense, culture was as adaptive as fire or clothing. The ability to adapt culturally also allowed humans to exploit environments beyond the reach of biology. Seafaring opened islands and archipelagos. Agricultural practices transformed landscapes into food-producing systems. Technologies such as bows, traps, and fishing nets expanded diets. Each innovation extended human possibilities, allowing populations to flourish in places where other hominins could not. This adaptability gave Homo sapiens a decisive edge over Neanderthals and Denisovans, who may have lacked the same degree of cultural plasticity. Adaptation also shaped human diversity. Isolated groups developed unique languages, customs, and identities, giving rise to the immense variety of cultures seen across the world. These cultural adaptations, though diverse, shared a common purpose: survival and flourishing in specific environments. The diversity of human societies today, from Arctic reindeer herders to Amazonian foragers, testifies to the creativity and resilience of our species in responding to environmental challenges. In conclusion, the success of Homo sapiens lay not in raw strength or even superior brains alone, but in the ability to combine biological and cultural adaptation. This dual strategy allowed them to colonize every continent and thrive in the most extreme conditions. While other hominins were limited by their environments, humans reshaped theirs, creating new ecological niches and cultural lifeways. Adaptation, in its broadest sense, is the hallmark of our species, the secret of how we conquered the world. The emergence of symbolic thought stands as one of the defining milestones of human evolution. While earlier hominins used tools and likely engaged in complex behaviors, it was Homo sapiens who elevated cognition into the realm of abstract symbolism, creativity, and art. This development was not simply decorative, it represented a fundamental shift in the human mind. Through symbols, humans could convey ideas, preserve memories, imagine futures, and create shared realities that bound communities together. Symbolic thought was the invisible scaffolding upon which culture, religion, and civilization would eventually be built. The earliest evidence of symbolic behavior predates the full flowering of modern art but points to a growing capacity for abstraction. Around 100,000 years ago, humans at Blombos Cave in South Africa engraved geometric patterns onto ochre pieces and strung shell beads for personal adornment. These artifacts reveal a deliberate intention to represent and communicate, transcending immediate survival needs. Such symbols may have served as markers of identity, status, or group affiliation. Importantly, they reflect an ability to think beyond the here and now, to use objects as representations of concepts, a key leap in cognition. By around 40,000 years ago, symbolic expression exploded in what archaeologists call the Ecreative Revolution or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Cave paintings, carvings, and figurines appeared across Europe, Asia, and beyond. The Lascaux and Chauvet caves in France contain breathtaking depictions of animals, painted with skill, perspective, and sometimes motion effects. These works were not mere doodles. They required planning, technique, and symbolic imagination. The painted animals may have held ritual or spiritual significance, serving as part of hunting magic, storytelling, or mythic traditions. They show that humans had entered a new stage of symbolic consciousness. Sculptural art also emerged during this period. Figurines such as the Venus of Willendorf, dated to around 25,000 years ago, represent stylized female forms with exaggerated features. While their exact meaning is debated, fertility symbols, spiritual icons, or aesthetic creations, they demonstrate humans' ability to create representations divorced from immediate function. Portable art objects suggest that symbolic thought was integrated into daily life, not confined to hidden caves. This capacity to carry and share symbols reinforced cultural transmission, ensuring continuity across generations. Music and performance were another domain of symbolic expression. Archaeological finds of flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory, dating back over 40,000 years, show that music accompanied early human life. Rhythm, dance, and song likely played roles in rituals, storytelling, and group cohesion. Unlike utilitarian tools, music serves no direct survival function. Its adaptive value lies in social bonding, emotional expression, and cultural transmission. Through music, early humans could create shared emotional experiences, reinforcing group identity and cooperation. The rise of symbolic thought also paved the way for religion and spirituality. Burial practices became more elaborate with grave goods, ornaments, and symbolic artifacts. These suggest beliefs in an afterlife or in the symbolic significance of death. The act of burying the dead with care reflects abstract thinking about existence, mortality, and meaning. Such practices highlight the human capacity to imagine realities beyond sensory experience, to invest the world with spiritual or symbolic dimensions. Symbolic thought reshaped social structures as well. Language, art, and rituals created shared narratives that bound groups together more strongly than biological ties alone. Identity could be constructed not just by kinship but by symbolic affiliation, belonging to a group defined by totems, myths, or cultural symbols. This expanded the size and cohesion of human communities, giving them an advantage in cooperation and conflict. Symbolism, in this sense, was not a luxury but a critical survival adaptation. Art also functioned as a form of education and communication. Stories painted on cave walls or enacted through rituals transmitted knowledge about hunting, animals, and moral codes. In pre-literate societies, symbolic art was the textbook, preserving and transmitting cultural wisdom. This ability to encode and share knowledge ensured cultural continuity, allowing humans to build upon the achievements of previous generations. Unlike instinct-driven animals, humans created cumulative cultures where ideas could grow and evolve. In conclusion, symbolic thought was the spark that ignited humanity's creative fire. It allowed us to represent, imagine, and communicate in ways no other species could. The art and symbols of early humans were not mere decoration. They were tools of survival, identity, and meaning. They marked the beginning of culture as we know it, setting the stage for the languages, religions, and civilizations that would follow. The rise of symbolic thought was, quite literally, the birth of the human mind. For most of their history, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, moving across landscapes in search of food. This way of life was remarkably successful, sustaining our species for tens of thousands of years. But around 12,000 years ago, a profound transformation occurred: the agricultural revolution. Humans began to domesticate plants and animals, shifting from nomadic foraging to settled farming. This transition reshaped human societies, economies, and environments in ways that continue to this day. It marked the dawn of civilization, but it also introduced new challenges, inequalities, and dependencies. The agricultural revolution began in multiple regions independently. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people domesticated wheat, barley, lentils, and sheep around 10,000 BCE. In China, rice and millet were domesticated, while in Mesoamerica, maize, beans, and squash became staples. Africa domesticated sorghum and yams, while the Andes gave rise to potatoes, quinoa, and llamas. These independent centers of domestication highlight the universal capacity of humans to experiment, adapt, and innovate in response to environmental opportunities. The domestication process was gradual. Humans selectively bred plants for traits such as larger seeds, tastier fruits, and easier harvesting. Similarly, animals were chosen for docility, productivity, and usefulness. Over generations, this artificial selection created species that could not survive without human care. Wheat, for example, evolved to have seeds that did not scatter naturally, while cattle became increasingly dependent on human-controlled breeding. Agriculture thus represented a coevolutionary partnership. Humans shaped plants and animals, and they, in turn, shaped human societies. The shift to farming brought major benefits. Agriculture provided more reliable food supplies, allowing populations to grow. Surpluses supported larger communities, enabling the rise of villages, towns, and eventually cities. Farming also allowed people to store food, reducing vulnerability to seasonal shortages. These changes freed some individuals from constant food gathering, creating opportunities for specialization in crafts, trade, and leadership. The agricultural revolution thus laid the foundation for complex societies and civilizations. Yet the transition was not without costs. Early agricultural diets were less diverse than foraging diets, leading to nutritional deficiencies. Archaeological evidence shows that early farmers were shorter, less healthy, and more prone to disease than their foraging ancestors. Sedentary living brought humans into closer contact with domesticated animals, facilitating the spread of zoonotic diseases such as measles and smallpox. Inequality also grew as farming created surplus resources that could be controlled, accumulated, and inherited. Social hierarchies and class divisions began to emerge, with elites controlling land and resources while others labored. Agriculture also had profound environmental impacts. Deforestation, soil depletion, and irrigation transformed landscapes on a massive scale. Human manipulation of ecosystems led to both abundance and vulnerability. Crops could fail due to pests, droughts, or floods, creating food insecurity. Where foragers had flexibility to move and adapt, farmers were tied to their fields, making them more dependent on the stability of local environments. The agricultural revolution thus created both new possibilities and new risks. Culturally, agriculture transformed human identity and worldview. Fertility cults, seasonal rituals, and agricultural myths reflected the new centrality of farming in human life. Deities of harvest, rain, and fertility became prominent in early religions. The rhythm of agricultural cycles shaped calendars, festivals, and traditions. Farming societies placed a premium on land ownership, inheritance, and kinship, embedding agriculture deeply into social and cultural institutions. The agricultural revolution also enabled technological innovation. Pottery developed to store surplus food, metallurgy arose to create better tools, and writing systems emerged to track harvests and trade. These advancements were interlinked. Agriculture created surpluses, surpluses supported specialization, and specialization spurred technological growth. Without agriculture, civilization as we know it, cities, states, writing, science would not have emerged. In conclusion, the agricultural revolution was a double-edged sword. It provided abundance, growth, and complexity, but also introduced inequality, disease, and environmental challenges. It marked a decisive break with the foraging past, setting humanity on a path towards civilization. While hunter-gatherer life had been more egalitarian and flexible, farming societies traded mobility for stability and diversity for productivity. The agricultural revolution was not simply a technological change, but a profound reconfiguration of the human relationship with nature, society, and self. The agricultural revolution paved the way for the rise of early civilizations, which represent the next great chapter in the evolution of Homo sapiens. For the first time, humans began to live in large, complex, stratified societies with cities, governments, religions, and economies. Civilizations arose independently in several parts of the world: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes, between 3,500 and 2000 BCE. These societies transformed human life, creating institutions and innovations that would shape history for millennia. Civilizations institutionalized knowledge, preserving and transmitting it through schools, scribes, and libraries. Yet the rise of civilization also introduced new challenges. Hierarchies became entrenched, with elites, priests, and rulers dominating peasants, artisans, and slaves. Gender roles often became more rigid, with patriarchal systems limiting women's roles in public life. Warfare intensified as states competed for territory, resources, and power. The concentration of populations in cities made societies vulnerable to disease outbreaks, famine, and political collapse. Civilizations brought both remarkable achievements and profound inequalities. Culturally, civilizations enriched human experience. Literature, philosophy, and art flourished, giving voice to human aspirations and anxieties. The Epic of Gilgamesh explored mortality, friendship, and the search for meaning. Egyptian tomb art depicted visions of the afterlife. Chinese philosophies such as Confucianism and Taoism laid moral and metaphysical foundations that continue to resonate. Civilizations transformed symbolic thought into enduring cultural legacies, shaping the intellectual and spiritual life of humanity. In conclusion, early civilizations represented a new stage in the slow evolution of Homo sapiens. They built upon the foundations of agriculture, symbolic thought, and social cooperation, creating complex societies that could organize, innovate, and endure. Civilizations were double-edged, sources of creativity and oppression, abundance and inequality. But they marked the beginning of recorded history, the era in which human actions and ideas became inscribed in enduring forms. Through civilizations, humans began not only to adapt to the world, but to remake it on a grand scale. Language is arguably the most profound achievement of Homo sapiens. It is not simply a tool for communication, but the very fabric of human thought, culture, and society. While other species communicate through calls, gestures, or pheromones, humans developed a complex, flexible, and infinitely generative system that can express abstract ideas, past events, hypothetical futures, and intricate emotions. The evolution of language marks the point where biological evolution gave way to cultural evolution as the primary engine of human progress. The origins of language remain debated, but most scholars agree that it emerged gradually, shaped by both biological and cultural pressures. Anatomically, humans developed a vocal apparatus capable of producing a wide range of sounds. The lowering of the larynx and the refinement of the tongue and lips allowed nuanced articulation. Neurologically, areas such as Broca's and Wernicke's regions in the brain evolved to support syntax, semantics, and speech processing. These biological shifts were likely gradual, but once established, they gave humans an unparalleled capacity for communication. Early hominins likely used proto-languages, systems of vocalizations, gestures, and symbols more complex than ape calls but less sophisticated than modern language. Over time, these systems became more structured and expressive. The selective pressures driving language evolution were likely rooted in cooperation. Complex foraging, hunting, and social living required precise communication about locations, strategies, and relationships. Language allowed coordination across larger groups, giving Homo sapiens a competitive edge. Once language emerged, it transformed human cognition itself. Words are not just sounds, they are symbols that enable abstract thought. Through language, humans could categorize the world, create mental models, and share them with others. This capacity for shared intentionality, understanding not only one's own goals but those of others, was a cognitive revolution. It enabled humans to collaborate in ways no other species could, from coordinated hunts to the construction of symbolic rituals. The invention of grammar, rules governing word order, tense, and meaning was a crucial breakthrough. Grammar allowed humans to generate infinite sentences from finite words expressing past, present, and future, as well as hypothetical or imagined scenarios. This generativity made language a tool not just for describing reality, but for creating new realities. Through language, humans could plan, invent, and dream collectively. As human societies grew more complex, so too did their languages. Dialects, vocabularies, and oral traditions evolved to reflect the specific environments and cultures of different groups. Language became a marker of identity, distinguishing one group from another. The diversity of languages, today numbering over 7,000 worldwide, reflects the adaptability of human communication to varied cultural and ecological contexts. Each language encodes unique ways of seeing and interpreting the world, shaping thought as much as it expresses it. The invention of writing marked another great leap. Oral language is fleeting, tied to the moment, but writing allowed speech to be captured, preserved, and transmitted across time and space. The earliest writing systems, cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, oracle bone inscriptions in China, emerged around 3000 BCE, initially used for accounting and administration. Writing quickly expanded to record myths, laws, literature, and science. It extended memory beyond the brain, creating external repositories of knowledge. Communication systems continued to evolve alongside technological innovation. The invention of the alphabet simplified writing, making literacy more accessible. The printing press democratized information, fueling revolutions in science, religion, and politics. In the modern era, electronic media, telegraph, telephone, radio, television, and internet has globalized communication, connecting billions in real time. Each new medium has reshaped how humans interact, learn, and organize societies. Language also underpins power structures. Control of literacy, narrative, and discourse often determined who held authority. Rulers, priests, and scholars used language to codify laws, define ideologies, and legitimize rule. At the same time, language became a tool of resistance, enabling marginalized groups to challenge dominant narratives. The politics of language, whose voices are heard, which languages are preserved or suppressed, remains central to human history. In conclusion, the evolution of language was not just a biological adaptation, but the birth of culture itself. Language enabled humans to transcend the limitations of individual minds, weaving countless individuals into shared symbolic worlds. It remains our greatest invention, one that continues to evolve with technology, shaping our identity and destiny. Without language, the story of Homo sapiens would never have been written. Technology has always been a defining feature of humanity. From the first stone tools to modern artificial intelligence, technology reflects the human impulse to extend our abilities, reshape environments, and solve problems. Unlike other species that rely primarily on biological evolution, humans innovate culturally and technologically, adapting rapidly to new challenges. The story of human evolution is inseparable from the story of technology. The earliest tools predate Homo sapiens. Homo habilis used simple stone flakes over 2.5 million years ago, while Homo erectus developed more refined Acheulean hand axes around 1.7 million years ago. These tools expanded dietary options, enabling access to meat and marrow, which provided the energy to fuel growing brains. Fire, mastered around 1 million years ago, was another transformative technology. It provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food, making nutrients more digestible and supporting further brain growth. For Homo sapiens, technology advanced rapidly. By 100,000 years ago, humans were producing composite tools, spears tipped with stone points, bows, and arrows, and later, fishing gear. These innovations increased hunting efficiency and expanded dietary diversity. Clothing and shelters allowed humans to survive in diverse climates, supporting their spread across the globe. Each invention reflected not just ingenuity, but also the cultural sharing of techniques, as humans taught and learned within communities. The agricultural revolution marked a technological watershed. Domestication of plants and animals was itself a technological innovation, requiring selective breeding, irrigation, and food storage methods. Farming spurred related technologies: the plow, pottery, metallurgy, and wheel. These transformed societies, enabling surplus production, population growth, and the rise of cities. Technological progress was not isolated. Innovations reinforced each other, creating cascades of change. Civilizations amplified technological development. Mesopotamians developed advanced irrigations, built monumental architecture, and Chinese civilizations pioneered papermaking, gunpowder, and the compass. The Greeks and Romans contributed engineering feats such as aqueducts, roads, and mechanical devices. Technologies diffused through trade and conquest, accelerating global interconnectedness long before the modern era. Steam engines, mechanized factories, and railways transformed production, transportation, and society. Technology shifted from tools that aided human labor to machines that replaced or magnified. This created unprecedented economic growth, but also environmental degradation, urbanization, and labor exploitation. The Industrial Revolution exemplified the double-edged nature of technology, empowering but also destabilizing. In the 20th and 21st centuries, technology entered an exponential phase. Electricity, automobiles, airplanes, nuclear power, and digital computers reshaped every aspect of life. The internet created a global communication network, erasing barriers of distance and time. Biotechnology enabled genetic engineering and medical advances, extending lifespans and altering biology itself. Artificial intelligence now promises or threatens to redefine intelligence, labor, and creativity. Technology has always been intertwined with social structures. It can empower but also concentrate power. Control of metallurgy, printing, or digital platforms has historically translated into political and economic dominance. The digital age raises new questions about surveillance, privacy, and inequality as access to technology becomes a key determinant of opportunity. Importantly, technology is not value neutral. It reflects human choices, priorities, and biases. The tools we create shape our behaviors, relationships, and environment. The wheel enabled transport but also warfare. Nuclear power provides energy but also weapons of mass destruction. The internet connects communities but also spreads misinformation. Humanity's challenge is not just to invent but to govern technology responsibly. In conclusion, technology is the mirror of humanity's creative impulse. It is both our greatest ally and greatest risk, amplifying our capacities while magnifying our flaws. The slow evolution of Homo sapiens has always been accelerated by technological leaps. The question for the future is whether technology will remain under human control or reshape humanity itself. Human evolution cannot be understood without considering the environment. Climate change, shifting ecosystems, and geographic diversity were the crucibles in which human adaptation was forged. Far from being passive actors, humans evolved in constant dialogue with the natural world, responding to environmental pressures with biological and cultural innovations. The earliest stages of hominin evolution occurred in Africa during periods of fluctuating climate. Around 7 million years ago, the ancestors of humans lived in forested environments. As climates shifted and savannas expanded, bipedalism became advantageous. Walking upright freed hands for tool use and improved mobility across open landscapes. Climate change thus directly shaped one of the defining features of humanity: upright posture. Throughout prehistory, cycles of glaciation and warming drove migrations and adaptations. Homo erectus spread from Africa into Eurasia partly in response to resource availability. Cold environments selected for innovations such as clothing, fire, and shelter. In contrast, tropical environments fostered foraging strategies adapted to abundant but diverse resources. Each climatic zone demanded unique solutions, fueling cultural and technological diversity. The emergence of Homo sapiens around 300,000 years ago also coincided with climatic variability. Fluctuating rainfall patterns in Africa created a refugia where small populations survived and innovated. This may explain the bursts of symbolic behavior and tool complexity seen in early Homo sapiens. Environmental challenges forced adaptability, selecting for cognitive flexibility and social cooperation. Migration was often driven by climate. Humans left Africa multiple times, with successful dispersals around 70,000 years ago, coinciding with ecological opportunities. Crossing deserts, mountains, and seas required remarkable resilience and innovation. Each new environment, from the freezing Arctic to tropical rainforests, reshaped human lifeways. For example, Arctic populations developed fur clothing and sled technologies, while islanders mastered seafaring and navigation. The agricultural revolution was itself a response to environmental change. The end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago brought warmer, more stable climates. Abundant wild cereals in the Fertile Crescent encouraged domestication, while similar processes unfolded in China, the Americas, and Africa. Farming was not inevitable. It was an adaptation to favorable ecological niches. Civilizations rose and fell with environmental shifts. The Akkadian Empire collapsed around 2200 BCE due to drought, while the Maya civilization faced decline linked to climate stress. Irrigation systems both enabled and undermined societies as salinization and water shortages destabilized agriculture. The environment was never a passive backdrop, but an active force in shaping history. In modern times, human activity has reversed the dynamic. Instead of adapting to climate, humans are altering it. Industrialization has driven unprecedented environmental change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, and global warming. The Anthropocene marks a new era in which humans are geological agents, reshaping the planet at scale. Yet even in this era of dominance, humanity remains vulnerable to environmental crises such as climate change, pandemics, and resource scarcity. In conclusion, the environment has been both the stage and the scriptwriter of human evolution. Climate shifts, ecosystems, and geography shape not only biological traits but also cultural innovations. Adaptability to environmental change became the defining strength of Homo sapiens. The challenge of the future will be to sustain that adaptability while preserving the ecosystems upon which we ultimately depend. The emergence of complex societies is one of the most dramatic milestones in the slow evolution of Homo sapiens. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in small hunter-gatherer bands, often numbering no more than 20-50 individuals. These groups were egalitarian, mobile, and relatively simple in structure. But around 12,000 years ago, a transformation began. A shift from small mobile groups to large, sedentary, stratified societies. This change was neither sudden nor universal, but where it occurred, it profoundly altered the trajectory of human history. The foundations of complex societies were laid by agriculture. Farming produced food surpluses, which allowed populations to grow. Once food production exceeded immediate needs, it became possible to support non-farming specialists, leaders, priests, artisans, and soldiers. Surpluses also required storage, redistribution, and protection, creating new roles and hierarchies. Thus, agriculture made inequality possible and, in many cases, inevitable. With population growth came urbanization. Villages turned into towns, towns into cities. Jericho, one of the earliest known cities dating back to 9000 BCE, had walls, a tower, and organized communal labor. In Mesopotamia, Sumerian city-states such as Uruk, 4000 BCE, became centers of administration, trade, and culture. These early cities concentrated people, wealth, and power, accelerating cultural and technological innovation. Social stratification accompanied urbanization. Leaders emerged to organize irrigation, defense, and trade, but they also consolidated power for their own benefit. Hierarchies developed between rulers, elites, and commoners, as well as between men and women. Slavery appeared in many societies as conquered peoples or debtors were forced into servitude. While inequality created social tension, it also enabled the development of institutions, arts, and sciences supported by surplus labor. Religion became central in legitimizing authority. Priests, temples, and rituals reinforced the idea that rulers governed by divine sanction. Monumental architecture such as ziggurats, pyramids, and stone circles not only expressed spiritual beliefs, but also displayed the organizational capacity of societies. Shared myths and religious systems help bind large groups of strangers into unified communities, replacing kinship with ideology as the glue of society. Trade networks expanded alongside complexity. Surpluses of grain, textiles, or metals were exchanged across regions, spreading ideas, goods, and technologies. The Silk Road, which connected East Asia to the Mediterranean, exemplifies how complex societies became interconnected long before globalization. These exchanges enriched societies but also exposed them to new risks such as disease transmission. Governance structures evolved to manage growing populations. Bureaucracies emerged, using writing to record taxes, laws, and decrees. Hammurabi's Code in Babylon c. 1750 BCE illustrates how law became an instrument of social order. Written codes reduced arbitrary rule and set precedents for justice, even if biased toward elites. States emerged as institutions capable of projecting power over large territories, often maintained by armies and fortified structures. Art, culture, and science flourished in complex societies. Writing preserved literature such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. Mathematics and astronomy developed for agricultural and religious purposes. Artisans produced pottery, jewelry, and sculpture, elevating human creativity to new heights. Complex societies fostered both the best and worst of humanity. Magnificent achievements alongside exploitation and war. It is important to emphasize that complexity was not inevitable. Many groups continued living as hunter-gatherers or pastoralists, thriving outside of state structures. Complexity carried costs, disease, labor inequality, environmental degradation. Yet once established, complex societies tended to expand and dominate, shaping the global history of humanity. In conclusion, the development of complex societies was a turning point that transformed Homo sapiens from scattered bands into civilizations. It created institutions, hierarchies, and technologies that still define our world. While not without drawbacks, complexity enabled humans to scale cooperation to millions, achieving feats unimaginable in earlier eras. The agricultural revolution, often called the Neolithic Revolution, stands as one of the most significant transitions in human history. For most of our existence, humans survived as hunter-gatherers, relying on wild plants and animals. This lifestyle was adaptive, sustainable, and highly mobile. Yet around 12,000 years ago, in several regions of the world, humans began to domesticate plants and animals, creating settled farming communities. This revolution reshaped human evolution, societies, and environments forever. The first agricultural experiments took place in the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey. Here, wild wheat and barley grew abundantly, and animals, such as sheep and goats, were suitable for domestication. Over centuries, humans selected seeds from plants with favorable traits, larger grains, easier threshing, greater yields. Through unconscious and later deliberate selection, wild species were transformed into domesticated crops. Similarly, animals were bred for docility, productivity, and utility. Independent centers of agriculture arose elsewhere. In China, millet and later rice were domesticated. In Mesoamerica, maize, beans, and squash became staples. In the Andes, potatoes and llamas were domesticated. Africa contributed sorghum and yams. These independent agricultural revolutions demonstrate that farming was not an accident but a response to similar pressures: population growth, environmental change, and resource scarcity. The shift to agriculture was gradual, not sudden. Early farmers often combined cultivation with foraging, relying on wild foods during shortages. Over time, as farming techniques improved, reliance on agriculture increased. Sedentary life emerged as permanent villages formed, marking a sharp departure from the nomadic lifestyle of hunter-gatherers. Agriculture transformed human societies in multiple ways. Population growth was one of the most significant effects. Farming could support larger numbers of people than foraging, leading to demographic explosions. This growth, however, created pressures for more intensive farming, creating cycles of innovation and dependency. Diet also changed dramatically. Hunter-gatherers consumed a diverse range of plants and animals, providing balanced nutrition. Early farmers often relied heavily on a few staple crops, leading to malnutrition and health issues. Archaeological evidence shows that early agriculturalists were often shorter and suffered more diseases than their foraging ancestors. Yet despite health costs, farming's productivity made it dominant. Property and inequality emerged alongside agriculture. Land, crops, and livestock could be owned, inherited, and controlled. This created wealth disparities, hierarchical societies, and social stratification. Gender roles also shifted, with women often relegated to domestic labor while men controlled fields and herds. Patriarchal systems became entrenched in many farming societies. The agricultural revolution also transformed the environment. Forests were cleared, rivers diverted, and landscapes reshaped to support crops. Humans became ecological engineers, often at the expense of biodiversity. Soil depletion, salinization, and deforestation accompanied farming's spread. These environmental consequences foreshadowed modern ecological crises. Despite drawbacks, agriculture enabled profound achievements. Surpluses supported specialists, from artisans to warriors laying the foundation for complex societies. Farming made possible monumental architecture, writing, and science. It also created cultural transformations, rituals tied to planting cycles, myths about fertility and harvest, and deities associated with agriculture. It is worth noting that agriculture was not universally adopted. Many groups remained pastoralists or foragers, thriving in environments unsuitable for farming. Some even resisted farming due to its labor intensity and risks. Yet, over millennia, farming societies expanded, often displacing or assimilating non-farming groups. In conclusion, the agricultural revolution was a turning point that reshaped humanity's relationship with nature. It enabled population growth, civilization, and innovation, but also brought inequality, disease, and environmental challenges. It was the first great experiment in reshaping ecosystems, one that continues to define human existence today. Closely tied to the agricultural revolution was the domestication of plants and animals. Domestication represents a partnership between humans and other species, one that has profoundly transformed both. Through selective breeding, humans reshaped the biology of countless organisms, while these organisms reshaped human societies in return. Plant domestication was central to farming. Early humans selected plants with traits advantageous for cultivation. Larger seeds, shorter growing cycles, resistance to shattering, and palatability. Wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent were among the first, followed by rice in East Asia, maize in the Americas, and sorghum in Africa. Over generations, these plants diverged dramatically from their wild ancestors. Domesticated wheat, for instance, cannot disperse its seeds without human intervention, binding its survival to human care. Animals were domesticated for food, labor, and companionship. Dogs, domesticated over 15,000 years ago, were likely the first, aiding in hunting and protection. Sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs followed, providing meat, milk, hides, and wool. Horses, domesticated around 4000 BCE, revolutionized transport, agriculture, and warfare. Each domesticated species became integrated into human lifeways, altering economies, diets, and cultures. The domestication process was not one-sided. Humans also adapted to their domesticates. The spread of dairying, for example, led to genetic evolution in humans. Lactase persistence, the ability to digest milk in adulthood, spread in populations dependent on dairy. This Jun culture coevolution illustrates how domestication reshaped both partners. Domestication also created risks. Proximity to animals facilitated zoonotic diseases. Pathogens jumping from animals to humans. Smallpox, influenza, and measles originated in domesticated livestock. While devastating, these diseases also influenced natural selection, favoring immune resilience in human populations. Beyond biology, domestication transformed human societies. Animals became symbols of status and identity, from cattle wealth in Africa to horse warriors in Eurasia. Plants shaped cuisines, rituals, and mythologies. Corn, for instance, became sacred in Mesoamerican cultures, woven into religious and cosmological systems. The environmental consequences of domestication were profound. Grazing livestock transformed landscapes, while monoculture farming reduced biodiversity. Yet domestication also created stable food supplies, enabling urbanization, population growth, and specialization. It tied humans to the land, binding their fate to the survival of their crops and herds. Over millennia, domestication expanded beyond subsistence. Selective breeding produced varieties for beauty, labor, or novelty, ornamental plants, draft animals, and companion pets. Modern genetic engineering extends this process, allowing humans to alter genomes directly. In many ways, domestication is still ongoing, with humans reshaping species for changing needs. In conclusion, domestication was a partnership that redefined evolution. Humans reshaped plants and animals, but in doing so, they reshaped themselves. The domestication of species laid the foundation for agriculture, civilization, and culture, making it one of the most transformative processes in the slow evolution of Homo sapiens. The birth of civilization marks one of the most dramatic leaps in the slow evolution of Homo sapiens. Whereas agriculture and domestication laid the foundation, it was the rise of cities, writing systems, and centralized states that transformed human life into something profoundly new. These developments created structures that allowed millions of people, often strangers, to live, work, and cooperate under shared systems of governance and culture. The civilizations that emerged between 4000 and 2000 BCE in regions such as Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China became the templates for later societies across the globe. Cities were the hallmark of civilization. Unlike villages or small towns, cities concentrated populations in the tens of thousands, creating hubs of trade, religion, politics, and innovation. Uruk in Mesopotamia, often considered the world's first true city, housed perhaps 50,000 people at its height. Within its walls were temples, administrative centers, and marketplaces. The density of urban life created new opportunities for interaction and creativity, but also required systems to manage conflict, distribute resources, and maintain order. Writing was another revolutionary development. Initially invented to keep track of trade and taxation, writing soon expanded to record myths, laws, treaties, and histories. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform was etched onto clay tablets, while in Egypt, hieroglyphs decorated temples and tombs. The Indus Valley script and Chinese oracle bone inscriptions reveal independent origins of literacy. Writing created memory beyond the human lifespan, allowing knowledge to be preserved and transmitted across generations. It also became a tool of power. Those who controlled writing often controlled administration, religion, and law. The emergence of states was closely tied to cities and writing. A state is more than just a large community. It is a political entity with centralized authority, laws, and the ability to enforce order through military power. In Mesopotamia, city-states like Ar and Lagash developed kingship systems. In Egypt, pharaohs unified vast territories under divine authority. The state organized irrigation, coordinated defense, levied taxes, and built monumental architecture. While often oppressive, states allowed for levels of coordination and stability impossible in smaller communities. Civilization also accelerated cultural production. Monumental architecture such as ziggurats, pyramids, and city walls not only served practical purposes, but also symbolized the power of rulers and gods. The arts flourished with sculptures, jewelry, and pottery displaying new levels of sophistication. Religion took on more complex forms, with pantheons of gods and organized priesthoods that mediated between the human and divine. Trade expanded dramatically in civilizations. Cities became nodes in long-distance trade networks. Mesopotamia imported timber from Lebanon, copper from Oman, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Egypt traded with Nubia and the Levant. These exchanges spread not only goods but also technologies and ideas. Urban centers became crucibles of cultural diffusion. Civilizations also developed systems of inequality and exploitation. Social stratification hardened into castes, classes, and hierarchies. Slavery became widespread. Women's roles often diminished compared to earlier agricultural communities as patriarchal systems entrenched male dominance. Yet, paradoxically, civilization also created opportunities for women as priestesses, traders or rulers in some cases. War became institutionalized with the rise of civilizations. Organized armies replaced tribal skirmishes. Fortifications, chariots, and bronze weaponry transformed conflict into a major driver of history. While destructive, warfare also spurred technological innovation and state centralization. The birth of civilization was not universal. Many human societies thrived outside of cities and states, continuing as pastoralists, foragers, or village farmers. Yet once civilizations emerged, they expanded, colonized, and influenced surrounding regions. Civilization was both a cultural achievement and a form of domination. In conclusion, the birth of civilization marked the culmination of thousands of years of incremental changes in the evolution of Homo sapiens. Cities, writing, and states transformed scattered agricultural villages into powerful societies capable of monumental achievements and profound cultural legacies. These structures still shape the way humans live today. Beyond biological and technological change, the slow evolution of Homo sapiens has been profoundly shaped by culture, particularly myths, beliefs, and rituals. While genes evolve through natural selection, culture evolves through transmission, modification, and collective memory. Myths and rituals provided frameworks for understanding the world, regulating social behavior, and fostering cohesion among large groups of people. Myths are narratives that give meaning to existence. They explain origins, natural phenomena, morality, and destiny. In small hunter-gatherer bands, myths connected humans to animals, landscapes, and ancestors. As societies grew, myths expanded to encompass gods, creation stories, and cosmic order. For example, Mesopotamian myths like the Enuma Elish described the birth of the universe through divine conflict, legitimizing kingship as part of the cosmic order. Egyptian myths of Osiris and Isis explain death, resurrection, and divine kingship. Beliefs evolved alongside myths. Animism, the belief that spirits inhabit animals, plants, and objects, was widespread in early human cultures. Over time, animism merged into polytheism, with pantheons of gods embodying natural forces, human emotions, or political order. In some regions, monotheism emerged, emphasizing a single, all-powerful deity. Each belief system reflected and reinforced the social and ecological context of its people. Rituals gave physical form to myths and beliefs. From burial ceremonies to harvest festivals, rituals created shared experiences that strengthened group identity. Rituals often involved music, dance, sacrifice, and symbolism, appealing to both emotion and intellect. They also functioned as social regulators, reinforcing norms and hierarchies. Priests, shamans, or rulers often mediated rituals, consolidating their authority. The psychological functions of myths and rituals were significant. They provided comfort in the face of uncertainty, death, and suffering. They offered explanations for phenomena otherwise inexplicable, such as disease, drought, or natural disasters. They also created moral codes, prescribing behaviors and punishing transgressions. In this way, myths and rituals acted as precursors to law and ethics. Cultural evolution of myths and rituals was not static. New stories emerged, old ones adapted. Conquest, migration, and trade spread myths across regions, often blending traditions. The Greek pantheon absorbed influences from Mesopotamia and Egypt. Hinduism incorporated diverse deities and practices over millennia. Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism spread across continents, reshaping cultures while also absorbing local traditions. Importantly, myths and rituals also shaped identity and political power. Kings claimed divine ancestry or favor, legitimizing their rule. States used rituals such as coronations, sacrifices, and festivals to unify populations. Myths often justified wars, conquests, or social hierarchies, embedding power in cosmic narratives. Despite scientific progress, myths and rituals remain powerful today. National myths shape identity, from founding stories to heroic figures. Rituals such as weddings, funerals, or national holidays provide continuity and cohesion. Even secular societies rely on rituals to mark transitions and create shared meaning. From an evolutionary perspective, myths and rituals were adaptive. They allowed large groups of humans to cooperate, trust, and sacrifice for collective goals. Without shared beliefs, it is unlikely that civilizations could have emerged or endured. In conclusion, the cultural evolution of myths, beliefs, and rituals was as significant as biological evolution in shaping humanity. They gave meaning to existence, bound societies together, and legitimized authority. They remain central to the human experience, a testament to the symbolic and imaginative capacity of Homo sapiens. The evolution of the human brain is perhaps the single most important factor in the success of Homo sapiens. While many animals exhibit intelligence, tool use, and communication, the human brain reached a level of complexity and specialization that enabled language, abstract thought, creativity, and cultural transmission. Understanding how the brain evolved and specialized sheds light on why humans, among all species, came to dominate the planet. The brain of early hominins such as Australopithecus was only slightly larger than that of modern chimpanzees, about 400–500 cubic centimeters. With the emergence of the genus Homo, brain size began to expand. Homo habilis averaged around 600–700 cc, while Homo erectus reached 900–1100 cc. By the time of archaic Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, brain size had grown to 1200–1600 cc, overlapping with or even exceeding modern humans. Yet brain size alone is not the full story. Specialization of brain regions and neural connectivity were equally crucial. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, decision-making, and social behavior, expanded significantly. Broca's area and Wernicke's area, linked to speech and language, became more developed, enabling complex communication. The parietal lobes, associated with spatial reasoning and tool use, also grew. The growth of the brain came with costs. Large brains require enormous energy, consuming about 20% of the body's calories. This demand likely drove evolutionary changes in diet, such as increased meat consumption and later cooking, which made calories more accessible. Large heads also created challenges for childbirth, leading to earlier births and prolonged infant dependency. Human infants are born neurologically unfinished, requiring long parental care, which in turn fostered social cooperation. The brain's specialization underpinned uniquely human abilities. Language allowed abstract communication, cooperation among strangers, and cumulative culture. Memory and imagination allowed humans to plan for the future, remember the past, and conceive of things that did not exist: gods, laws, money, and stories. Creativity led to art, music, and invention. The social brain hypothesis suggests that human brain evolution was driven by the demands of living in large groups. Managing relationships, alliances, and social hierarchies required greater cognitive capacity. Gossip, storytelling, and rituals helped regulate these relationships, reducing conflict and building trust. Importantly, brain evolution was not just biological, but also cultural. Human brains are shaped by experience and environment in ways far more flexible than most animals. Language acquisition, literacy, and cultural practices sculpt neural connections. Thus, brain evolution created a feedback loop. Larger brains enabled culture, and culture in turn reshaped brain development. Neanderthals had brains as large as or larger than modern humans, but their organization may have differed. Some research suggests Neanderthal brains devoted more capacity to vision and movement, while Homo sapiens allocated more to social cognition and symbolic thought. This difference may explain why modern humans developed complex art, religion, and large-scale cooperation. In modern times, the human brain continues to adapt. Literacy, technology, and digital environments reshape how brains process information. While genetic evolution of the brain may have slowed, cultural evolution continues at a rapid pace, altering how the brain is used. In conclusion, the growth and specialization of the human brain was the engine of human evolution. It enabled language, culture, and abstract thought, setting humans apart from all other species. The brain remains the most complex organ in the known universe, the crown jewel of millions of years of slow evolution. Human communication is one of the defining traits that separates Homo sapiens from all other species. While many animals communicate through sounds, gestures, or chemical signals, humans developed language, an infinitely flexible system of symbols capable of expressing abstract, complex, and creative ideas. The slow evolution of communication shaped our ability to cooperate, transmit culture, and build societies. Without it, civilization would never have been possible. The origins of communication go deep into pre-human history. Our primate relatives use vocal calls, facial expressions, and gestures to convey information. The chimpanzees, for example, use specific calls for food, danger, or social bonding. These rudimentary systems demonstrate the evolutionary roots of human communication. Food. Early hominins likely used a mix of gestures and vocalizations, slowly increasing in complexity as brains expanded and social groups grew. Gestural communication probably played a crucial role. Anthropologists suggest that hand movements, pointing, and facial expressions form the basis of early symbolic systems. Fossil evidence shows that early Homo species had increasingly dexterous hands capable of expressive movements. Over time, gestures may have evolved into more abstract symbols, paving the way for spoken language. Vocal communication advanced as anatomical changes occurred. The lowering of the larynx and reshaping of the vocal tract in Homo sapiens enabled a wide range of sounds. This anatomical flexibility, combined with neural specializations in Broca's and Wernicke's areas of the brain, allowed humans to articulate complex speech. Neanderthals, once thought to lack speech, likely had some form of vocal communication, though whether it matched modern human language remains debated. Language was a revolutionary adaptation. Unlike fixed calls, language is generative. It allows infinite combinations of words to create new meanings. It enables humans to discuss past and future, to tell stories, to imagine possibilities, and to coordinate large groups of strangers around shared goals. Through language, humans invented myths, laws, and contracts that made large-scale cooperation possible. The role of gossip in early societies cannot be overstated. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed the gossip hypothesis, which argues that language evolved primarily to manage social relationships. In small bands, individuals could track relationships through observation. But as groups grew larger, gossip, sharing information about others, allowed humans to maintain trust, reputations, and cooperation. In effect, gossip replaced grooming as the glue of social cohesion. Writing was a later leap in communication, emerging around 3200 BCE. Writing freed memory from the limitations of the human brain. It allowed information to be stored, transmitted across distances, and preserved across generations. From Mesopotamian cuneiform to Egyptian hieroglyphs and Chinese characters, writing systems expanded human communication beyond speech into permanence. This in turn enabled complex administration, literature, and science. Today, communication continues to evolve rapidly. Printing, telecommunication, and digital networks have transformed how humans share information. The Internet, in particular, represents a radical expansion of human connectivity. Billions of people now exchange messages instantly across the globe, creating a vast, interconnected, global brain. However, human communication also comes with challenges. Language allows deception as well as cooperation. Miscommunication can cause conflict. Propaganda, misinformation, and manipulation exploit the same systems that make cooperation possible. The evolution of communication, therefore, carries both benefits and dangers. In summary, the slow evolution of human communication transformed humans from clever primates into symbolic cultural beings. Language and writing enabled shared myths, laws, and identities that bound millions together. Our ability to speak, write, and now digitally communicate remains one of the most powerful tools in human evolution. Cooperation lies at the heart of human success. While many animals cooperate in limited ways, humans extended cooperation to unprecedented levels, forming large, complex societies of strangers. This capacity required not only language and culture, but also the evolution of morality, a system of norms, values, and behaviors that regulates social life. Understanding how cooperation and morality evolved reveals why Homo sapiens survived and thrived where other species did not. In evolutionary terms, cooperation is puzzling. Natural selection favors individuals that maximize their own survival and reproduction. Yet cooperation often involves sacrifice, sharing food, protecting others, or punishing cheaters. Why would individuals act against self-interest? Evolutionary biology offers several explanations: kin selection, reciprocal altruism, group selection, and cultural evolution. Kin selection explains why individuals sacrifice for relatives. By helping kin, an individual ensures that shared genes survive. This explains parental care and sibling cooperation. But kin selection alone cannot explain why humans cooperate with unrelated strangers. Reciprocal altruism provides another explanation. If individuals help each other with the expectation of future return, cooperation can be stable. This is the principle behind "I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine." Reciprocity is observed in primates and likely shaped early human behavior. Yet humans go beyond reciprocity. We cooperate in groups of thousands or millions, often with complete strangers. This is where cultural evolution plays a key role. Shared norms enforced by social pressure and moral codes created trust among strangers. Those who followed norms were rewarded with reputation, while cheaters faced punishment. Gossip, rituals, and symbolic markers reinforce group identity and cooperation. Morality evolved as a set of emotional and cognitive mechanisms that regulate cooperation. Emotions like guilt, shame, and empathy encouraged prosocial behavior. Moral outrage and anger punished wrongdoers. Cognitive abilities such as perspective taking and fairness judgments allowed humans to navigate complex social landscapes. Together, these mechanisms created moral communities bound by trust and shared values. Religion amplified cooperation and morality. By positing supernatural agents that monitored behavior, religions created powerful incentives for moral conduct. Belief in God's ancestors or spirits who rewarded good and punished evil helped stabilize large societies. In this way, religion functioned as a supernatural police force that reinforced norms. Law and institutions later formalized morality. States codified rules, punishments, and rights, making cooperation more predictable. Written laws such as Hammurabi's Code in Mesopotamia provided stability in large, diverse societies. Over time, legal systems evolved to regulate property, trade, marriage, and governance, institutionalizing morality at the state level. The evolution of cooperation also explains the success of Homo sapiens over Neanderthals. While Neanderthals were intelligent and capable, evidence suggests modern humans were more adept at forming large cooperative networks. These networks allowed humans to innovate, trade, and adapt more quickly, giving them a survival edge. Modern morality continues to evolve. Concepts of justice, equality, and human rights reflect cultural evolution as societies expand cooperation beyond kin, tribe, or nation to include all humanity. Yet challenges remain, as humans also struggle with tribalism, prejudice, and exploitation. The same mechanisms that foster cooperation within groups can fuel hostility between groups. In conclusion, the evolution of cooperation and morality was central to the rise of human civilization. By creating trust, regulating behavior, and enabling large-scale collaboration, cooperation transformed humans into the most social and successful species on Earth. Morality, shaped by biology and culture, remains one of the defining features of what it means to be human.